Welcome into the Golfbet Preview Show for the BMW Championship presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm Will Gray, editorial lead of Golfbet. Pleased to be joined by Ben Everill, Golfbet senior writer. Ben, you may notice we are not yet at Olympia Fields. We'll get there soon enough, but we had to make a quick detour to the restaurant at DraftKings Sportsbook at Wrigley Field. What a space, what a place. If you're a sports fan, if you're a sports bettor, this is a great spot to be just a few feet away from where the Cubs play their home games.
Yeah, an iconic venue here, Wrigley Field, and what a sensational space. And I checked out the menu a minute ago. Looks phenomenal, so you can't get better than this, really.
All right, we want to talk about the menu of betting options this week for the BMW Championship. Only 50 guys in the field, but you, Ben, were on site last week in Memphis for the FedExCup Championship. You saw Lucas Glover win back-to-back, beating Patrick Cantlay in that playoff. What is one storyline that you're looking forward to this week in Chicago?
I want to know about the momentum for those players who did play well in Memphis. It was so stinking hot. We're lucky we survived. I almost melted out there on course on one of those rounds. I want to know if Cantlay can continue after that disappointing shot in the playoff, as you mentioned. Can Lucas Glover go 3 in a row? Or, Rory, who was one off the playoff. Are those guys going to be able to maintain their energy going forward?
I asked for one storyline, you give me 3, but that's okay. I'm talking bubble. I'm really interested to see who is going to make it into that 30-man field at East Lake for the Tour Championship. There's always so much drama, especially over the weekend, about are you 28th, are you 32nd? Tons of perks and benefits come with being in that 30-man field at the end of the season. Drama is a guarantee.
Yeah, it's always drama on the bubble, and as we know, almost every season it comes down to one shot whether you move on, and I'm expecting the same again this year.
All right, plenty of fun betting topics to dive into for the BMW Championship this week, but to do so, we have to get to the course. Let's head to Olympia Fields. All right, Ben, we have made it to Olympia Fields. The best in the world are practicing just a little bit over our shoulder here. And among that group, the DraftKings oddsmakers have a clear delineation. The top 4 guys, all plus 1,000 or shorter. And I'm interested in your thoughts. The betting favorite this week, it's not the guy that won here in 2020. It's not the guy that won here the last 2 events. It's not the guy that's number 1 in the world. It's Rory McIlroy. Do you buy into Rory, a near miss last week in Memphis, at plus 650 as your outright favorite?
Short answer is no, Will. Look, he's at that plus 650. It's way too short for me. You mentioned that he was close last week, but really, he wasn't. He was in that final round and never really put the pressure on like I would have liked to see. Having said that, this course has got a little wet. It's one for the Bombers. It does suit up to his game, so I can see him playing well, but I would advocate maybe looking at the first round leader market first, getting a little bit more juice on your odds there, and then assessing whether you want to get into him after that first round, second round, before I start sort of going gung-ho on Rory.
Interesting to see Rory at plus 650 to win the tournament, but he is plus 1,200 at DraftKings, as you mentioned, just to lead after the first round among this 50-man field. All right, I want to turn our attention to the guy that did win here 3 years ago. Just over there on the 18th green, made that crazy putt, Jon Rahm. Didn't have a great week last week in Memphis, still leading the FedExCup. He's sitting there at plus 900. What are your thoughts on the big Spaniard?
I think that's a little bit more value than what we saw on Rory. Look, you mentioned it, he won here 3 years ago. And what was important there, the only bogey he had on the weekend was when he picked up his ball without marking it. An absolute brain fade from John. I'm pretty sure he won't have that problem again this week. Look, I love it. I love the fact that he can bomb it out here. I think he's got those good memories. He did not play well last week, but I think that'll have him rested from Swampland, USA, where we were last week in Memphis. It took a lot of energy for some guys there. He was able to sort of back it off just a little over the weekend and sort of fine-tune things. I think we'll see a different Jon Rahm this week, and I think he's a huge contender. Different course than it was last time, of course, but I still feel like it's time for Jon Rahm to really ramp up his momentum.
Think anyone's going to ask Jon Rahm about picking up that ball? Just a couple of folks might mention that this week. All right, Ben, we need to dive in the numbers here with the world number 1. Top 5 in strokes gained off the tee, around the green, approach, tee to green, 146th in strokes gained putting. Scottie Scheffler, you got to figure it out on the greens, plus 700, just behind Rory McIlroy. What do you think?
I mean, look, he is the tee to green master. He'll probably bring that back. He wasn't at his best last week as well, but I just can't trust him when that putter is so cold. So cold. And I mean, like, when can you trust him? I don't know. You've got to wait. I said it's too short from the start, kind of like what we said with Rory. I need to see something from Scotty before I'm looking at an investment.
I tend to agree. It's been waiting and waiting for that putter to align. We were both at the Players where he won by 5. You feel like that's, when it clicks, it's going to click into a runaway for Scottie Scheffler, but I'm not going to buy in at such a short price waiting for that to happen. And we're rounding out our group of contenders at plus 1,000 or shorter with the guy that's sitting at plus 1,000. Mr. Playoffs, right? Patrick Cantlay nearly won 4 out of 6 playoff events, a runner-up last week in Memphis in that playoff. two-time defending champion at the BMW, trying to go for the full Tom Emanski, back to back to back. Do you think he can do it, and what do you like about his game right now?
Yes, I think he can do it. He was really, really good on Sunday last week. Just spectacular tee to green stuff, really ramping that up. And as you said, he is Mr. Playoffs. He's the guy that's proven that he can get on a run when it's hot here. And look, I did have a little bit of time with his coach, Jamie Mulligan, afterwards, and we spoke about how that one loose shot, he'd played so well all day, and that one loose shot in the playoff was what ultimately cost him. He's fired up. Now, a bit of insight. He spent last week, early in the week, putting on a huge couple of range sessions, 3-4 hours to really kick into gear. He'd pulled the team together, this is Patrick, and said, you know what, it's time to really step this up. It hasn't been the year I wanted. Let's get to work. Let's go real hard in these 3 weeks and prove to everyone that we still belong in this higher echelon. So he's got the mindset, he's got the game. You got to watch out for him. He's the value guy in the top 4.
Hard to win the same event 3 years in a row. Haven't had that happen since 2011. Steve Stricker at the John Deere. Harder, even more, to win 3 different courses 3 years. We'll see if Patrick Cantlay can do it. Next up on the Golfbet DraftKings Preview Show, we're going to talk a little DFS. All right, we are back at Olympia Fields Country Club for the BMW Championship. It's time to talk a little daily fantasy. I know enough to be dangerous, but we need to bring in the experts. It's a FedExCup Playoff event, and to do that this week, I'm joined now by David Barnett from Tour Junkies. DB, you know the DFS space inside and out. I need to talk strategy this week. Only 50 guys in the field, so lineup duplication is a real concern when you're talking about potential contests. What do you do as you construct your lineup to make sure that your winners will potentially stand out?
I mean, first of all, you don't want to be duplicated because you're automatically eliminating EV there, right? You've already eliminated potential earnings. So we don't want to do that. There's 50 guys in the field. You can't play them all. So first of all, I'd say get tight. Get tight with your player pool, smaller player pool. You can't play everybody. You got to be comfortable fading really good players. And then leaving money on the table is also pretty important. You're tempted to use that $50,000 cap space that DraftKings gives you, but you don't have to. Leaving money on the table usually means that you won't be so duplicated. I'm even comfortable enough to leave even $1,000 on the table because you've got really good players here.
Yeah.
So that's important.
We're going to find out more about how you're fading some of those top guys in a minute, but I want to talk also about ownership projections. It's a key tool in the DFS community, and especially for an event like this. How much time are you spending looking at ownership projections, trying to figure out which players are going to be more heavily owned than others?
I mean, ownership leverage is the name of the game. If you want to finish in the top 1% of DFS contests, you have to have players who are lower owned and less popular. So I like to look at outright markets and how players are steaming, if they're getting shorter, if they're popular, usually also indicate that they're going to be pretty popular in DFS. And having that leverage is critical. One other thing that I've started to do in the last couple of years is when you find your leverage plays, whoever they may be, maybe they're in the 7K range or the 8K range, when you're building your lineup, put those guys in first, because we're tempted to go ahead and say, I'm going to put Scotty Scheffler in and then I'm going to work down. Put your leverage plays in first. That makes you choose those guys and then fill in the gaps around, and you probably will have a unique lineup and you'll have plenty of ownership leverage. Ownership
leverage, as you said, is so key in the DFS setup, especially for this week, but we need to talk about those chalk guys. You mentioned the 7, 8K range. I want to talk 10K and above. Give me one guy that you're bullish on this week at a high price and one guy among those top favorites that you're going to go in the other direction.
Well, unfortunately, I think he's going to be chalk this week, but he wasn't last week. He was a great leverage play up top in Jordan Spieth. Landed the top 10 last week. He's kind of in that bubble zone for Eastlake, but he played great last week, and he had it on a string off the tee, which when you see that out of Jordan, I think that's a warning shot to the field because he could be coming. So yeah. I definitely like Spieth as probably now chalk I'm willing to take on.
Anyone you're going on the other side of those top guys?
Yeah, so a bold fade.
You got to do it. I'm going to make you do it. I need a name. Give me a name.
A bold fade for me is going to be Jon Rahm.
Oh, and you did it. You went and did it.
I know. Defending champion here at Olympia Fields, but when he came into Olympia Fields, his previous 5 tournaments, if you look at the 5 tournaments leading up to the 2020 BMW and the 5 tournaments leading up to this one, he is 0.9 strokes per round worse coming in this year than he was going into the 2020 BMW. He's not hitting it as well off the tee, and that's a little bit of a concern for me. So if I'm going to fade a big name, it's going to be Jon Rahm.
All right, warning shots across the bow. Now, you talked about trying to find slots in those 4, 5, 6 range in our lineups and identifying potential leverage guys. I want to play a little rapid fire, this or that. Who do you like better for your lineup this week? Start in the lower range. 7,100 versus 7,200. Keegan Bradley, Taylor Moore. Which way are you going?
I like both players, but this is where the DFS game comes in, because in DFS it's not always about picking the player you like the most, but if there's opportunity with leverage, and I think there is, I'm going to take Keegan Bradley because I think Keegan Bradley's going to be lower owned than Taylor Moore. This feels like a very Keegan Bradley golf course. So even though Taylor Moore had a great week, I think I'm going to jump on Keegan here at Olympia Fields.
Former BMW champ, although not necessarily
True.
at Olympia Fields.
True.
We're going to go up one more, a little higher, 8,400, 8,500. Sam Burns, Cam Young.
We just walked by Sam Burns and saw that flow coming out of the hat. It looks like he's even dyed it. He's got this mullet thing going on. The swag is there. He's also kind of in that East Lake bubble, but he's also in the Ryder Cup bubble. Yeah. Him and Ricky Fowler are both battling for that 12th spot. I think I'm going to go Sam Burns. I think the upside is just as high as Cam Young.
David Barnett, Tour Junkies, leaning on Strauss-Gain mullet for Sam Burns this week. We'll see how it pans out in his lineups and in yours in the DraftKings DFS contest. All right, next up, we're going to do a deep dive on the course here at Olympia Fields Country Club. All right, we are just off the fairway here at the 10th hole at Olympia Fields. I'm joined once again by Golfbet senior writer Ben Everill. Ben, you and I were both out here in 2020 for Jon Rahm's victory at the BMW. It was firm, it was fast. This time around, a lot of rain in the last couple of days. We feel the moisture here beneath our feet. This can be a different golf course, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday it absolutely bucketed down here. The rain was deluge proportions and it's really soft underfoot. Now, even if we get sun for the next week, I still think it's going to be soft underfoot. We're not going to see anything like we did when Rahm was the winner there. However, will it suit the bomb and gouge? I don't know. I'm looking at this rough. It's a lot juicier than I was expecting. I thought they might cut down a little. You're telling me they won't do it. So that might mean that you're going to have to be a bit more accurate than I was expecting.
I don't think we're going to see the high scores that we saw back in 2020. I think you're going to have an easier time getting under par this week. But remember, of the 50 guys in the field this week, only 23 played the 2020 BMW at Olympia Fields. This is not a course that a lot of guys know very well. Most of the field have played it maybe one time or they've never seen it before. Is that an advantage? Is that something you're going to work into your handicap to look back at those 2020 standings and say, hey, this guy played well, this guy didn't?
I am going to look at those standings and factor that in, but you're right, it might almost be an advantage, or you could make an argument for it, to not have played here because it is going to play so different. However, the greens are still the greens.
Yep.
They've still got those complexes. If you know how to read them, if you had some, we saw Rahm make that huge double snaker, that's still there for him. If you know that, you're going to have a slight advantage. So that's where you will get some factoring in. But yeah, look, it's one that we have to toss up for sure.
Yeah. We know that we've already had a chance to dive into some of the betting favorites. We looked at the top of the board. I want to go a little bit further down. Give me a mid-tier guy, let's say between plus 2,000 and plus 5,000, maybe a higher price, but someone that you think really has a chance in the outright market this week.
Well, I'm going to look at Hideki Matsuyama. Look, I know last time we said it might be a bit of a different course. He was third last time out, but it's what he did on Sunday in Memphis that really impressed me. 5 under in his last 6 holes to get here. Now he's playing with a bit of house money. He really wants to get to the Tour Championship. It would be 10 in a row, a record 10 in a row if he can do that. And I just really think, he's top 15, strokes gained tee to green approach, even around the green. I think he's in the top 10 on tour. So with all that being together, I think Hideki could be a bit of a sleeper this week.
I've got someone else kind of in that range near Hideki, plus 3,500 at DraftKings Sportsbook, and that's Tony Finau. We've talked earlier in the show about guys that are on that Ryder Cup bubble. Tony Finau is right there, and I think that he needs a big week this week on a course where he was 5th in 2020. It's going to play a little different, but his advantage off the tee with that length I think is going to be significant. Big Tony has not really been a factor since that win over Jon Rahm at the Mexico Open back in April. Ben, I think that changes this week. I think we're going to get Tony Finau back on the leaderboard and potentially with that trophy in his hand. But let's go a little further down. Let's talk long shots. It doesn't have to be all about who's going to win the tournament. There are secondary markets, there's props, derivative markets. What are some of the ways or maybe some of the players you're looking at to get some action that's outside of who's going to win this tournament?
Before we get to players, I might say at the plus 400 for a playoff here is something that I think could be fun. We had a playoff last week, had a playoff here last time. We've only got 50 guys, but they're all so good and they're all going to be really keen to get it done on Sunday. So there might be a little value there. But in terms of if you're looking at players in the top 10s, 5s, 20s, etc., you know where I'm looking? Around the bubble.
Yep.
The guys that know they need to make a move, they need to be in it for all 4 days. Your Sahith Theegalas. He's a bomber of the golf ball. If he can get it on the map, he could be someone. He's 31 in the FedEx Cup, so keep an eye on him. Just inside the bubble, we've got someone like Corey Connors, who played really well last week with his putter. He didn't have his usual tee to green. If he brings his usual good playback, Along with that putting, I think he could be a sneaky option to keep an eye on in those markets. And then if you want to go way down a bit further, 40th in the FedEx Cup, Ben Everill showed a little bit last week. And first round leader, 40 to 1, that could be a good play.
Always good to keep in mind for this tournament. 50 players in the field at Olympia Fields. Only 30 are going to make it to next week's Tour Championship. I'm going to go with a bit of a boom or bust option. I like Sepp Straka, not necessarily to win, but I love him at plus 1,200 at DraftKings for a top 5 finish. We saw what he did at the John Deere Classic, then followed that with a runner-up finish at the Open. He can play pretty well off the tee. If you won a Honda Classic, you can know how to drive your golf ball. And I think, remember, only 50 guys in the field, so a top 5 only means you're in the top 10% of the field, if I did my math correctly. I like that plus 1,200 option. Sepp Straka is not going to be in it every week, Ben, but when he's there, he's often at the top.
Yeah, like just birdies or bust for him. You're right, 100%. He's good value if he gets it going, and he had a really good last round last week in Memphis.
Well, plenty of ways to get in on the action this week at the BMW Championship. And this week, DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the PGA Tour, and this week, new customers can bet $5 and pocket $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app, use the promo code TOUR when you sign up. All right, well, that's going to do it from Olympia Fields, but we're not done yet. We're heading back to Wrigley to share some of our best bets for this week's BMW Championship. All right, the band is back together. We are excited to once again be at the restaurant at DraftKings Sportsbook at Wrigley Field. I'm Will Gray, joined by David Barnett from Tour Junkies, Ben Everill, senior writer from Golfbet. And gentlemen, we have a chance to peek behind the curtain here in front of me. Hot off the presses, we've got information from oddsmakers at DraftKings Sportsbook about where the money is going ahead of the opening round of the BMW Championship, which players are seeing some odds shifts. And Ben, I want to start with you. A couple of guys whose odds are shortening. They're moving in the right direction. Ben on 55 to 1 to 45 to 1. Nick Taylor, a long shot, 180 to 1 to 130 to 1. Keegan Bradley, 70 to 1 plus 7,000 down to 55 to 1. Does one of those guys stand out to you?
Well, Ben Everill, mate. Of course, I had him for first round leader at plus 4,000, so I'm loving that. I think, as I said, we saw him play a little bit today. He was striping up from what we saw. I really like what I saw there. And I'll just quickly say Keegan Bradley must be getting some Ryder Cup love.
That's true.
And Canada, Nick Taylor. Well, good luck, Canada.
All right, not to tip my hand here for later in the segment, but I might have a little bit more to say about Keegan Bradley. We shall see. David, we're going the other way. Denny McCarthy opened at plus 7,000, 70 to 1. He's out to 80 to 1. Matt Fitzpatrick, 4,000, out to 4,500. And Lucas Glover, the hottest man on the PGA Tour, opened at plus 2,800. Not a lot of buy-in. He's all the way out, not all the way, but a little bit of a change out to plus 3,000 or 30 to 1. Which one of those stands out to you?
So the people are starting to doubt the back-to-back champion,
Lucas
Glover. I don't know that I want to touch that right now. To me, it's Matt Fitzpatrick. He stands out the most. I mean, we know he's a super talented player. He's not been playing great since the win at Heritage a couple months ago. But this is a course that I think suits him really well. If I were going to bet any one of those three, it'd probably be Fitzpatrick. Plenty of length, loves tough golf courses, good around the greens. But that one's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a stud.
When the odds makers look at how liabilities are racking up, it's usually split between handle and tickets. Tickets are individual bets placed. Handle is the amount of money being placed on individual players. A couple stand out, one from each category. I want your reaction. On the ticket side, second in tickets behind Rory McIlroy. Not a surprise to see Rory number 1 as the betting favorite in both categories. Adam Schenk, kind of backdoor to top 5 last week at the FedEx St. Jude Championship. A lot of love for Adam Schenk out there. And then on the handle side, Ben, Rory, Victor Hovland, and then Corey Connors. Maybe we do have a lot of Canadian contingent coming down to Chicago. What are your thoughts on those as some players and some bettors try and find some mid-range value?
Yeah, well, the Canadians, they must have seen what I saw with Corey Connors actually playing well last week with his putter. It was the putting that got it done. It's not usually his MO. If he can bring his ball striking back and marry that up with what he did on the greens last week, he's absolutely a chance, and that would make sense. And I don't know about Schenk, man. Maybe he's just going to be the guy that gets on a roll in the playoffs. We've seen Billy Horschel do that, Chris Kirk in years past. He could be the man that people are expecting to do that.
All right, we've got a round table. I want to go round table. We're going to go rapid fire. We'll talk winners in a minute, but David, give me your favorite bet outside of the outright market for this week.
Well, we all just have a thing for Ben on today, I guess. We saw him hit some balls. He was a stripe show. He was confident as ever. And he sits outside that top 30 number. He's got to make a really good move. And he's up against Tony Finau in a tournament matchup. They're both minus 110. I mean, Ben On's been playing better than Tony. Since the win in Mexico, Tony's been a little cold. I mean, I'm going to say it. So he's motivated. He's playing well. This is a great course for him. Hits it a mile. Great around the green. Irons are sharp. Doesn't have to putt it as well with the winning score, likely not getting better than 10 or 12 under. So I'll take Ben On in that tournament matchup over Tony Finau.
Ben On turning into the people's play here, and it's interesting to see
Everybody
that Tony.
loves Ben On.
Yeah, Tony Finau is one of those guys that is moving in the opposite direction at DraftKings Sportsbook.
There you
He
go.
opened at plus 3,000. Now he's out to plus 3,500. So kind of agreeing with what you're saying there. Maybe the sentiment is not quite where Tony needs to be. Now I'm going to go. We mentioned him earlier, Keegan Bradley. You said he's on the Ryder Cup bubble. I agree. I think Keegan's going to have a big week. I love him not for the week necessarily, but for tomorrow or for Thursday's opening round under 71.5. I get plus 110 on that bet. Remember, this is a par 70 on the North Course at Olympia Fields, and this is not the more difficult course that we saw 3 years ago. We were out there today. We saw the rain, the soft conditions. I think it's going to play a little bit more easy than it did in 2020. I don't know that these opening round over-unders have necessarily caught up to that. I think we're going to see more red numbers this week than we did 3 years ago. Ben, what are your thoughts?
All right, give me a top 5 on Sung Jae Im. He was tied for 6th last week. He was hitting it beautifully tee to green, but more importantly, his scrambling was on point. I think second in the field on scrambling, making sure that the odd time he does miss, he was getting the ball up and down. He's been a tee to green monster for his entire career, and the odds of plus 750, I think that there's value there. So watch out for Sung Jae Im, another former international team member like Ben Everill.
There you go. It's a ball striker's paradise. Could be this week at Olympia Fields. All right, one question on everyone's mind. We got to answer it. Who's going to win this golf tournament? I will lead things off, and I'm going to take someone a little bit further down on the odds sheet. 15 years ago, we saw a player win on the PGA Tour for the first time at the BMW. That was Camilo Villegas. I think we have history repeat this week. Cam Young gets in the winner's circle, plus 3,000 at DraftKings Sportsbook. I love his work off the tee. I love how he plays difficult and long and difficult golf courses. He's in that Ryder Cup mix. Really needs a standout performance. I think we get it this week from Cam Young. He gets off the schneid, and he gets that win number 1.
Back on bent grass.
Yeah, that's good.
I think I'll lean Jordan Spieth here at 28-1. I was all over him last week when a lot of people weren't. He played great, just kind of fumbled a little bit down the stretch on Sunday. But what I saw on Sunday, because I watched every shot, is he had the driver on a string for the most part, with the exception of 18. I think he had a drop like way back. But other than that, he had it on a string. And if we have Jordan Spieth hitting the driver where he wants to, then everyone needs to be on notice. 28-1 is a great value for me.
Ben, the winner of the BMW Championship is?
Let's rack up the chalk. I've got John Rahm there at plus 900, the defending champ at Olympia Fields. Yeah, sorry, I think he's a monster tee to green. I think he's rested from being in the sweltering heat, not having been in contention in Memphis. I think he's got a little bit more energy in the tank. And I know he was filthy at how he played last week, so that'll get him revved up to really push forward towards the Tour Championship and a potential FedExCup title. So John Rahm for me.
Hope that limb is sturdy enough that you're walking out on there, taking the number 1 and everything. Listen, there's a ton of action in play this week. We're really excited for the tournament at Olympia Fields, and we're excited for the week that lies ahead. But that's going to do it for this Golfbet Preview Show presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. We've had a great time here at the restaurant at DraftKings Sportsbook at Wrigley Field. A great day at Olympia Fields. For Ben Everill, for David Barnett, I'm Will Gray. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the action all week from Olympia Fields.